EV for only about 4.5 years, which I suppose in these times is a long time, but just a retired engineer and enthusiast, and I like to help people figure out if an EV is right for them.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Polton. I am one of the co-chairs of the Hudson Valley Catskill Climate Reality. I've got some of my posse here with me this evening. But my background, I've led corporate environmental sustainability programs and have a passion for the topic, and look for ways that we can help reduce our greenhouse gas footprint.
Shall we go around the room and see, who's interested in what here, maybe? If you want to introduce yourselves, Marilyn, why don't you go first?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Marilyn Oster. I'm here to find out what I can about EVs, and I'm also interested in hearing about the possibility of hydrogen, clean hydrogen, if either of you know about that and how far in the future that might be, or how that compares to electric.
Okay, James?
Yeah, hi. Jim O'Dowd from New Paltz. I'm also I guess I'm part of the posse that Tom mentioned. And I've been interested in EVs for a while. I talked with my friend Samrat about it. And I just trying to find out what's the latest, and then when am I gonna bite the bullet and actually do it, and so I'm working on that.
And Simon?
Hi, I'm Simon Strauss from the town of Olive. I'm interested in purchasing an EV, perhaps used. So I'm interested in hearing what the IRA incentives are for a used EV at this stage. I'm probably going to keep a long distance vehicle because I do a lot of boat towing to different sailboat championships around the country. So I want to keep something that will give me the flexibility for the moment anyway. I do have a friend who has a Tesla with a tow bar, so I know that folks can tow an EV, but some of these distance championships might be in Texas or Florida. So at the moment anyway, I don't plan to get rid of the van. So my EV use is probably likely to be no further than New York City and back.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds like you've all given this some thought, and I really just wanted to leave it open for your questions. I mean, I've got a couple PowerPoints I could show, but I think it's much more interesting to get into what your concerns are, and if we can get that answered. And I don't know, Simon, I might start with you just because you laid out one of the concerns right off the bat, I think. So yeah, EVs and towing is one of those things. It kind of gets blown out of proportion, I think. But I spent a lot of time battling myths. A myth buster, and like all good myths have a kernel of truth behind them. Some of them are more true than others, but the EV towing thing is a great one because electric motors are actually great at towing. However, EVs rely a lot on their aerodynamics and efficiency in order to get the range they do. And when you take something like an F-150 that already isn't terribly aerodynamic, and then you put a trailer behind it, it gets even less aerodynamic, and so your range is a fraction of what it's rated at when you're towing. So yeah, there's all these great commercials of EVs, towing train cars and all kinds of good things like this. But yeah, if you've got to drive from here to Texas, I don't. Yeah, it's probably one of those use cases that an EV isn't ready for that kind of a job yet. But other than that, if you've got another car around town, or driving, a few hours, or anything else you want to do, I think you're in the ballpark there. What other thoughts? Let me go back to Marilyn. What are your thoughts? What's held you up so far from having an EV in your garage? What are the things you're concerned about?
I suppose, had it not been for COVID, I would have been buying an EV now. But those were those years when I hardly drove my car, and so I think there's still some life in it. And it's a Prius, so you know. My concerns are when I say to people my next car is going to be an EV, I get a lot of these, what I think are myths, but it's difficult to tell what the truth is. I hear things like, they tend to burn up if you're in an accident, you're gonna, there's going to be a fire, and I hear stuff like they have all these bells and whistles, but the bells and whistles don't work very well. So they misread stuff along the side of the road as being something they should stop for. And so they stop in the middle of the road, and, you're going to get back-ended and stuff like that. So I would love it if you, I don't remember all of them, but I would love it if you would address some of those myths and,
those are great. And
in
fact,
and if there are downsides, then what are the downsides?
Yeah. Let me actually, maybe I'm going to share. Let me share my screen if I can, and maybe we can just go through some of those. So everybody can see that screen there. Okay, good. So yeah, these are the things everybody talks about, and like I said, there's sometimes a bit of truth to each of these, but they get blown out of proportion and misunderstood. And, what I like to tell people is I read about this stuff all day long, so you don't have to, because I just enjoy doing it. And I like, trying to get what the right answer is. And then, and it's hard because, the news sometimes covers this in a haphazard way or a superficial way, and they don't get into the whole story. So yeah, let me go through some of these. And so you can see yours on the upper right there, EVs catch fire and all this kind of stuff. So let me start in the upper left, right? Not enough range. I think if you were getting into electric vehicles 4 or 5 years ago, you might be able to make that point. But today it's pretty easy to find an EV that's going to get around 300 miles of range, and you don't have to pay the price of a small house for it. There certainly are ones that will get 400 or 500 miles. Those you start paying the price of a small house for them. But 250 miles, it seems to be what all the manufacturers have kind of settled on as a bare minimum for a good car. So almost every car you see now today will get an EPA range of 250 miles at least, and many will get around 300. So we're in good condition there. The next myth I always hear about, well, yeah, you're going to buy an EV, but then in 2 or 3 years, you're going to have to replace the battery and it's going to cost you $25,000, right? Okay, well, I go to a car show all the time. Well, there's a group of us that live around here, and we all tend to be at the same kind of EV shows. And one of the guys has a 2012 Tesla Model S with everything original on it, and he's got, I think he's got 175,000 miles on the car. on its original battery, and his battery still has about 90% of its original life to it, original capacity to it. So no, this is a complete myth. We really don't know anybody. I mean, there's lots of forums you can go. One of the things I suggest is, there's a Facebook group for Hudson Valley electric vehicle drivers. Reddit, if anybody has ever played with Reddit I actually found is one of the more factual and informative social media sites out there. It's not full of crap like a lot of them are that I find. So there's electric vehicle forums, and there's forums for each specific. You can get a Tesla one, you can get a Chevy, you can get, all different kinds of manufacturers groups where they talk about those. And so you can go in there and you can ask people what they're saying too. But, most EVs now are, have good warranties on them. So like I said, my Tesla, which is 4.5 years old, had an 8-year, 120,000 mile warranty on it. So, the manufacturers wouldn't be giving out warranties like that if the batteries were all dying after 2 or 3 years and had to be replaced, because they would all be going out of business. So, certainly when you're shopping for an EV, ask about the warranty on the battery and the powertrain. You'll find, I think the Hyundais I'm seeing now are even, more than 8 years, 120,000 miles. Some of them are really good warranties, right? Let's see. EVs don't work in the winter. Okay, that's not true. But however, the kernel of truth is, if your car is outside in the frozen, middle of winter, it's not going to get as much range as it will on a 70-degree day like right now. The battery really likes to be around 70, 75 degrees. That's its sweet spot. If you're in Arizona and it's 95 or 100 degrees, the battery's going to struggle. If you're up here in upstate New York and it's freezing or below, your battery's going to struggle a little bit. Now, there's a lot of caveat. There's tons of caveats to that. I have a garage. Even though the garage isn't heated, it doesn't get that cold in the garage. And so if your car is in a garage and then you take it out and you run it even in the middle of the winter, your car really isn't getting that cold. You really don't have much of, you don't really lose very much range, even in the winter. So I really say this is for people who, you don't have a garage, you're parking outside and your car is completely frozen when you get up in the morning. Expect that you're going to have about 20% less range in your battery, right? That's what's going to happen. EV batteries catch fire often. Well, no, they don't. Actually, the rate of fires in EVs versus gas cars, the EVs have a much lower actually rate of fires than the gas cars do. I've looked for, estimates on this over the years. I've read articles that talk about that there's about 500 gas car fires per day. I've seen other ones which much, I don't like to use the 500 number because I've seen that a couple times, but I've seen lots of people quoting at least 200 a day. So, every time a Tesla catches fire, it makes the news, but the 200 gas cars that catch fire every day, that never makes the news. So it's just become, kind of a normal thing that gas cars catch fire. And if you think of it, at one point, I wrote up a little thing to talk about this, to tell people, well, let's assume that we all had electric cars and we'd had electric cars for 100 years. And now there is this new invention called gasoline. And you wanted to put this in your car and you're trying to explain this to someone. You say, wait a minute. So you want me to carry a tank full of 10 or 20 gallons worth of highly flammable explosive liquid around, and you want to burn it inside my engine, and my engine works by actually exploding that that liquid and that's how the engine works? I mean, are you nuts? That's a disaster, right? So if you think of it like that, it almost sounds silly that we've been driving those kind of cars for all those years, and they've been and they are relatively safe, right? They don't catch fire, you know, at the drop of a hat. They do catch fire sometimes, but they don't catch fire at the drop of the hat. It's the same thing for EVs. The battery pack, I'll show you a picture quickly. So the battery pack in the car is down here at the bottom between the two wheels, right? And this design is called the skateboard. And it's a skateboard because it kind of resembles a skateboard in that you've got the wheels in the front, you've got the wheels in the back, and then you've got this big solid piece in the center that holds the battery. And this is pretty well shielded. There are now 5 million Teslas just by themselves on the roads around the world. And those things do get in crashes. If you want to go and see some fun, go to YouTube and look at a channel called Wham Bam Tesla Cam, which is really fun. It's all the cameras from Teslas recording accidents. And so certainly Teslas get in accidents. The other good thing about that skateboard design, though, is that with all the weight of a battery, and there is a good amount of weight in the battery, it's way down low. And so in an accident, there's no engine to crash through into the passenger compartment of your car. And generally EVs make out very well. Almost every manufacturer, their EVs make out very, very well in crash test ratings. So I'm pretty confident that I feel safe in an electric vehicle. The Tesla Model 3, Model Y have pretty much the highest crash test ratings you can give. Now, crash test ratings are interesting. They're done by NHTSA and done by the IHHS. And they have a certain rating. Now, a lot of cars get that Safety Pick Plus, top Safety Pick Plus rating. A lot of cars get that rating. But there are internal ratings that those agencies keep in terms of the probability of injury to the occupants for various cars. And Elon Musk's, bless his strange heart, leaked some of that information back when the Model 3 was being released, that the Tesla Model 3 had the lowest probability of injury of any car that those agencies had ever tested. Now, the agencies quickly yelled at him and said, you can't say that because we don't release that information. But it kind of got out and it got around. It makes sense, right? So I want to say that about EVs when I launch into, okay, yes, they don't catch fire very often. However, when they do, the EV fires are hard to extinguish, right? It's essentially, all the energy of the car is in that battery. It's essentially like, lighting the gas tank of your gas car on fire and trying to limit the fire once that's lit. So EV fires definitely are hard to extinguish. They can smolder, they can reignite, they can do all that. However, the car doesn't explode. It will burn if the battery pack is ruptured in the right way. It will burn and you get out. And in fact, I was just looking at some really cool kind of videos of people inventing things to help firefighters put out EV fires. So there's going to be a lot of training to the fire departments about how to put out the fires, and different new methods will be invented. But in general, my EV is parked in my garage. I don't worry about it catching on fire. It really just doesn't happen. You have to be in a pretty darn good crash to be able to crash that. Simon, got a question.
Related to that, I seem to remember that there've been a couple of car carrier ships, one pretty recently off Holland that went on fire, that were supposedly due to the cars that they were carrying being EVs somehow going on fire. Do you know anything about those?
I don't know anything about that. That would be interesting. It's certainly possible. Don't know. Yeah. Yep. So that's the fires. Let me get one down here. Charging your EV will overload the grid. No, it's not really going to. I think the major misconception here is that people think that your electric vehicle uses a tremendous amount of electricity. And compared to a lot of things, it does use a lot of electricity, but it doesn't really use that much. Your monthly electricity bill, I would say for probably most people, is going to be, way above 500 kilowatt hours, let's just say. A lot of people use about 1,000 kilowatt hours. So I don't remember. If you happen to know what your current electric bill is, you'll know whether those numbers are in the, in the right ballpark. Your EV has somewhere between a 60 or 80 kilowatt hour battery. So essentially, to charge your EV once is essentially about 1/10, perhaps, your monthly usage of electricity. Now, it depends how often you charge as to whether you really see a difference on your electric bill with that. It turns out I really don't. I'm retired. I don't really drive that much. I charge the car a couple times a month. I don't really notice the extra electricity. I've talked to other people who drive 200-mile commutes every day. They're charging every day or every other day. Yep, they're definitely going to see a lot more of a change on their electric bill with that. But the main thing here is I found a great chart that says that your electric vehicle, to charge up and for monthly use, uses about as much electricity as an electric water heater, and less electricity than the AC you would use in summer for a month in a large house. So it's really not that tremendously much. I don't remember when air conditioners came out that everybody screamed, "Oh my God, if we sell these to everybody, that's going to overload the grid and we're all going to live in the dark." They weren't worried about it. So that whole you're going to overload the grid thing. We live around Central Hudson, and we may not think Central Hudson is very smart, given some of the issues that people have been having with Central Hudson lately. But the utilities have been in the business of managing load for a good 100 years. They know how this happens, right? And so it's really not going to be an issue for that. The other thing is you can set your EV to charge at any time of the day. I don't use that much. Again, I don't charge that much, so I just plug it in whenever I feel like it. But Central Hudson, in fact, doesn't really offer very good of an incentive program for you to charge off peak. They have a time of use rate that you can use in the evening, but you have to, in my opinion, I've tried it a couple times. You have to shift like 95% of your electric usage into extreme off-peak time periods in order to pay with it. And I just don't want to do all my laundry and stuff in the middle of the night. But a lot of other utilities are offering better incentives to charge your EV at times that aren't when peak power is in demand. And so you can very easily do that. You come home from work and you plug in your EV, but you say, don't charge up until after midnight, and you'll get a really, really good rate on your electric. I'm gonna stop the myths there because I've been talking too long, and I've got some more to go over. But Marilyn, did I help you out a little bit there?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. I think you have to just, try to read up on that subject about the EV fires and see what, you know, if you can, you know, make yourself feel comfortable. I mean, I can tell you what I know after looking at it. You know, one of the other things was, you know, New York City having trouble in the apartment buildings with people with what I would call micro mobility devices, scooters and bicycles and so forth, and those batteries catching fire in apartment buildings. And there were a couple very highly publicized, you know, a whole apartment building goes up and some people were killed. And so the city has basically banned non-UL listed batteries from being used and charged inside. And what they really found was that these are, you know, like bike messengers and all kinds of people who use those kind of devices. None of this was cars. This was, you know, I bought an electric bike, but I bought the cheapest one I could find, and I bought a battery, and the battery isn't UL listed. And unfortunately, you know, that battery had a flaw in it and it caught fire, and that was a, you know, a problem. So there are instances like this. I think the CIA or Vassar, one of the colleges around here, did something similar. They said, okay, none of those devices inside your dorm, they all have to be charged outside. And I've had people, you know, tell me about that, thinking it was about cars. It's really not, because they didn't read the article closely enough. It's about, you know, scooters and e-bikes and things like that. But yeah, it's a good subject. There's a lot of information out there about it. So yeah, read what you can and see if you feel better. Yeah. James, I wanted to go to you and see what issues and questions, you know, you had.
Steve,
Is there a question? Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we answered Simon's question on tax programs for used vehicles, which he asked at the front. But do you want to do that after going to James?
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I was looking at the what is it? The Chevy Bolt and also the Nissan Leaf as two cars that I'm also retired. My wife is retired. We had you know, we had a hybrid car that my son actually ended up with it, and so now we have a Subaru, which is good for the winter time, but I don't like the gas mileage on it at all, and I really wanted to get a second car. We need a second car, not that much. We're doing pretty well with one car right now, but we wanted to get a second car, and I definitely want to get an electric vehicle. And just looking at and we have, mostly it's all local travel for us. I have a son up a little bit upstate in Hudson, and then I have another son in Washington, D.C. California son, forget about that. We're not driving to California. The DC, we would, you know, once in a while we would do that, and the range is a little past where they live in the DC area. But still, I'm not going to be driving that often to DC, you know. So it's coming down to one of the less expensive cars, and also I would consider a used car too, where we could get maybe one that's a little bigger than the Chevy Bolt or the Nissan Leaf. Yeah. So that's our story.
Yeah. So just my thoughts on that. The only thing with the Leaf is the Leaf uses a DC fast charging connector called CHAdeMO. It's the only, well, let's see, besides Nissan, I think there's a Mitsubishi plug-in hybrid I've seen that uses it, but it's the only manufacturer that's using that plug. So if you ever want to drive somewhere where you're going to have to charge on the road, the problem with the Leaf is going to be finding a plug that's gonna fit your car. So so pretty much, you know, you can get Leafs that are inexpensive and used. Driving around town, they'd be great, but on a trip, it would be really tough. Now, you know, the Japanese were the only people that ever used the CHAdeMO plug, and nobody else ever adopted it. And in fact, Nissan's newer vehicles don't use it because nobody ever adopted it over here. So the Bolt, like most other non-Teslas, uses something called CCS. And so again, it's a different plug and socket. There are quite a few, you know, CCS chargers around to use on your trips. And I will tell you, and this is not just me as a Tesla driver, but I've had my friends with Hyundais and everything else saying, if you want to drive, you know, any kind of distances where you're going to be charging on the road, the Tesla network really is the best right now, unfortunately. I say that unfortunately because I really want all these other car companies to succeed. I want, you know, there's a lot of choice out there. And in fact, recently what's happened is that Ford and GM and several others have decided to convert over to the Tesla plug and be able to use Tesla chargers. I think they've just realized that the Tesla charging experience is superior to, you know, what you can get with CCS, and so unfortunately that won't happen until 2025. They will come out with the, you know, the Ford and GM cars are going to come out with a Tesla plug starting in 2025. 2024, they've said they're going to give adapters so you can go from one to the other. And Tesla already started rolling out an adapter at their station, so you could charge a CCS car with you know, at a Tesla station. But that rollout's been kind of small, you know, small and limited so far. So I would tell you that, you know, going to Washington, D.C. is probably one of the easier places you could go, because going down Route 95, there's chargers all over the place. I'm going to drive next week to South Carolina, and we take 95 the whole way. And so with a Tesla, it's just so easy. There are literally every 10 miles, there's a charger. There's probably 20 of them on the New Jersey Turnpike. So it's really easy to go places with that. Now, used cars, the Bolt, my personal opinion, I think the Bolt is great. It's a low cost. You can buy a new one for about $19,000 with the tax rebates. So even a new one is a good deal. The Bolts charge. They do use the CCS plug, but I think they're limited to 50 kilowatts of power that can go into the car. And what that means is it's going to take a little longer to charge the Bolt. That's one of the reasons it's a little less expensive, is because it's not set up for high powered charging. Where most of the EVs you'll buy today charge at about can charge at about 200 kilowatts up to 300 kilowatts. And so that just means that you know, if you take it on a trip and you plug in, you're going to be there longer than some other cars might be. But again, for running around town, it's good. It's a front wheel drive. It's good for around here because, you know, we need, usually you want front wheel drive or all wheel drive around here. You might want to look at a used Tesla Model 3. You know, those can be gotten for in the, you know, the $20,000, you know, $25,000 range. And those are either all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. Mine is actually rear-wheel drive, and I, again, being retired on the 2 or 3 days a year where it's crappy outside, I just don't drive it. You know, so that's my thoughts on what you brought up. But yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that, you know, cost is the big thing right now. You know, there's a lot of EVs out there, but, you know, they are more expensive than buying gas cars. I think if you look at the cost of ownership with the maintenance and fuel price, you know, you can make a pretty good case that, hey, if I own this car for 5, 6, 7 years, I've broken even, or I'm making money on it, even though it cost more to begin with. But yeah, they're still expensive, and we don't have a lot of inexpensive used ones, out there. They get snapped up pretty quick.
One question I had about the Bolt is I heard, first of all, that they were discontinuing the model, and then I heard, no, they reversed themselves on that. Do you have any updates on that?
That's what I've heard as well. Yeah, Chevy said they're going to get rid of it because they've changed the whole GM has changed their EV platform to this platform called Ultium, and it's just car companies do that when they announce a new family of cars. They build essentially that skateboard or that platform, and then they plop a bunch of different bodies on them, right? And it's a cost-cutting thing for the car companies, right? They don't have to build something custom for each car model they come out with. And so GM did that, after they came out with the Bolt. They said, oh, well, we're going to come out with this new platform called Ultium, and it has their new Ultium batteries, and they have new battery plants coming up, and so that's what the new Cadillacs are based off of, and all these. And the Bolt was based off an old platform. So they said they're going to reintroduce the Bolt. We don't know whether that means, well, maybe they're going to redesign it and plop it on the Ultium platform and use the Ultium batteries that they're using for all their other cars. Maybe they're just going to continue making it the way it was. We don't really know what that means. But yeah, I know several people that had them, town governments that have them as, meter reading cars, and the building inspectors' cars and things like that. And they have a good record. Now, they did have a scare a couple of years ago with some Bolt batteries catching fire. They had some defect in the batteries. And Chevy finally, did the right thing and bit the bullet and recalled them all, and either bought the cars from people or they replaced all the batteries. And I haven't heard anything about that now for a couple of years. So it seems like they fixed that and they did a good job. If you're buying a used Bolt, the homework you should probably do is to make sure that whatever were the recall years on that, and that has the new battery in it that we don't have to worry about.
Right.
So,
Okay, I think I'm going to give Tom a chance now.
yeah.
Just briefly, I was going to share some information that we're asked about tax incentives. So let me just do that, and then we can hand it back to Steve as well and take any other questions. So if you recall, the IRA was about environmental issues, but equity issues as well. And so one of the key concerns was, how do we make the incentives that were introduced within the IRA available to as many in lower incomes as possible? So there are some income limits on what's available, but particularly on cars. So let me go first with the used, because that's the question that Simon had asked. There is a tax credit of 30% up to $4,000. The tax credit, it's a tax credit in 2023, I believe, and from 2024 on, it'll be offered as a rebate. The car model must be 2 years prior to the purchase year and must cost less than $25,000, sold by a dealer and available once per vehicle. But as you can see, there are some household limits for these tax incentives of $150,000 for a household, and $75,000 for an individual, claimable with once every 3 years there. So, but there is an incentive as well for new vehicles. That's up to $7,500. It does vary based upon where the car was made. There's an incentive under this bill for American-made parts and vehicles. So you really do need to check this link here to find the particular vehicle that you're looking for. I'll put in the chat the link to find it. But as I say, there are income limits as well for the new vehicles of $300,000 per household and $150,000 per individual. But there are ways around that in some respects. If you are interested in leasing a vehicle, the dealers have been very clever in providing that $7,500 or whatever it may be for that vehicle credit into the lease, regardless of income issues. So just that is an opportunity that some folks can maybe able to take advantage if the income limit is of concern. And you asked about the Chevy Bolt. As it happens, we have a case study written out for the Bolt, along with the federal and state incentives, to the point that Steve raised of the vehicles costing about $19,000. That's pretty close to what we look at after the federal and state incentives. And the Bolt is one of those vehicles that's American made and does get the full $7,500 in the tax credit. And we did discuss already the idea of time of use for EV charging, as Steve shared personal experience and knowledge. They're not always the most effective way, the way they're designed to take advantage of, but time of use can help you individually. You may not need to sign up for a program, but rather to charge your vehicle when rates may be lower, rather than sign up for one of the incentive plans that the utility offers. There is also a discount, and some of you mentioned your Prius owners. I believe it applies there too, to hybrids, but there is an opportunity to get discounts and savings via your Easy Pass for those vehicles. So I will put in the chat and I'll turn it back. But Simon, did we answer your questions with regards to tax incentives on used vehicles?
I think so. Is there a state incentive on used vehicles too?
I'm not aware of it, but I can certainly get back to you with that.
I don't think so. Yep.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Okay. And do you know whether the income limits include capital gains or just ordinary income?
I think it includes everything.
Yeah.
It's your total income as shown on your tax. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay.
We did. I know there was a question about hydrogen as well, which we can get into. I'm going to stop sharing this, and I will put in the chat the link for the final specific vehicle.
Yeah, let me try to address the hydrogen one, and then Simon, I want to give you a chance to ask any other questions too, and then we'll go back around everybody. Hydrogen is really interesting. I'll give you kind of personal opinion from everything I've read and looked at. I don't think hydrogen is going to be in passenger vehicles. I'll just leave it at that. If you look at the infrastructure needed to have hydrogen filling stations, it's massive. You have to make the hydrogen, and there are lots of ways to make hydrogen. The fossil fuel companies would love to make hydrogen out of fossil fuels, and that's not really helping, right? Or you can use massive amounts of electricity, and you can crack hydrogen out of water. That can be green if you use green electricity to do it. But then you've got to compress hydrogen. You've got to get it into filling stations. So California has been trying this for, I think, about a decade. And as far as I know, there's 1 or 2 hydrogen filling stations in all of California. So it just never really took off. Toyota kind of bet on hydrogen, and they created a hydrogen car. And those of us that believe batteries, electric, are the future have been kind of laughing at Toyota and wondering if they're ever going to come around. And they seem to have finally now come around and said, "Oh yes, we realize battery electric is the way to go." And they're working on a whole bunch of new models. The ones they have now are, there's a Toyota and Subaru joint venture. They produced a car called I think it's called the BZ4X. What a wonderful name. I think that's the Toyota, and the Subaru one I think is called the Solterra. But the spec wise, they don't really match up to what the other manufacturers are putting out. So Toyota has a way to go. But anyway, hydrogen may work for, long haul heavy duty trucks and some of those vehicles. But even their battery electric, I think, is making pretty good inroads. There's a lot of, I was just on New Yorkers for Clean Power yesterday, releasing the results of a study of medium duty and heavy duty trucks in New York City that are already in service with fleets, and what they're seeing in terms of numbers, in terms of cost savings, and so forth. And I think battery electric is already is already doing the things that that a hydrogen truck pretty much can do. So I'd be really surprised to see hydrogen go anywhere in the future. I'll leave it at that. Simon, do you have some other questions, and we'll circle back around to everybody else?
I just add on the hydrogen side, the guy who founded New Energy Finance, which got bought by Bloomberg, a guy called Michael Liebreich, has got some very good writings about hydrogen, and Bloomberg NEF is probably the leading research firm. And I know he believes exactly what you just said, which is it could be useful in the longer term. I think people are looking at ammonia cracked from very large scale renewables into sort of gigawatt size energy plants that produce millions of tons of ammonia as being potentially ship fuel to replace bunker fuel. So that's one use for clean hydrogen or green hydrogen. But I totally agree that I don't think it's at the retail level. The distribution is just too difficult.
Yeah.
Other than that, no, I think you've so far addressed all my questions that I can think of, and I'm sure we'll have more. I would like to see that list, which I think Tom just put in the chat, and then maybe you guys could put your contact information in case we've got more questions. We can just send you a note if that would be all right. Yeah,
that'd be great.
Awesome.
Marilyn, I'll just circle back to you. Has anything else popped up in the discussions here? Any other questions?
No, I think you've done a great job of answering the questions I had. Other than Tesla, are there any other cars, electric vehicles that seem to be really good, but not as expensive as Tesla?
Let me put up a page here. Where was I? Share. All right, I'm just going to share this. Oh, that should really say 30. I'm going to change that. It's probably more like 30 today. There are a ton of cars you can buy today. So there's our friend, the Chevy Bolt, right? And it's really one of the most inexpensive. Volkswagen ID4, great looking car. I think these are going to be in the mid 40s. Right. So a lot of EVs are going to be in the $40,000 to $50,000 range, unfortunately. Right now, again, you got to look at I think the total cost of ownership of these. My car I've had for 4.5 years. I have done nothing to it. There is no maintenance schedule that comes with the car. I've rotated the tires. There's a free place in Hyde Park here that rotates my tires for free. I put windshield wiper fluid in. I haven't done anything to it. Other cool part that's really fun is I have had to have the cabin air filter changed. The cabin air filter got a little funky, after 3 years or so. And so I go on to my Tesla app and I make an appointment and I say, I want a cabin air filter, and they tell you how much it's going to be. And then they say, okay, you're eligible for mobile service because you're far enough away from a service area, because the closest service area is Mount Kisco for me. And that's a little far. That's where you have to go to get the car, unfortunately, because there are no dealerships, and New York State still hasn't let Tesla put delivery centers everywhere in the state. I don't know why, but they gave them like 6 or 8, delivery centers several years ago. And of course, they all went down to the city because that's where, most of the people are, unfortunately. So I go down to Mount Kisco, so that's where the service center is. So I say, okay, yeah, I want to do this. And I'm far enough away from Mount Kisco. They send a car, they send a Tesla, an old Tesla Model S. That's all, done up as a service vehicle. They drive into my driveway, change the air filter for $65 and then leave. And so I can't beat that. So it's a great experience. So I've spent a total of $65 on service in 4.5 years. There's no oil changes. There's no fluid changes. There's no spark plugs. Your brakes ought to last you 100,000 miles because you really don't use your brakes very much. You don't use the brake pads. You don't use the brake rotors. My friend with the 2012 Model S, he's on his original brake pads and rotors at 175,000 miles. So, it is hard. I'm with you 100%. These cars need to come down in price. But I think if you look at most studies, they say already you will save money after 5 years or so of ownership with one of these. So you got the ID4 here. It's in the mid 40s. That's a Tesla Model S. They're about $70,000 or $80,000 too much. Ford F-150 Lightning, love it. Anywhere from $50,000 to $90,000, but it's a great vehicle. This is a Kia EV6. They're $40,000 to $50,000. The Tesla Model 3, this is the one I have. This is $40,000 to $50,000. This is a Hyundai Ioniq 6. I got to get this right. The Hyundai Ioniq 6, again, $40,000 to $50,000. Mustang Mach-E. This is a great car. I have a friend that has one. That's again probably $45,000 to $50,000. A Volvo XC40 small SUV. That's probably again $45,000 or $50,000. This is a Hyundai. What is it now? Shoot. This is one of the lower priced ones as well, but this is going to be in the 30s to 40. Oh crap! Now I can't remember the name of it. But you can find Hyundai small SUV. Audis, these are a little more expensive. The Tesla Model S, Model X with the stupid gull wing doors, that's expensive. And then just two new cars that are coming out like right now. 2024 Kia EV9. Now this is a big car. This is like the size of like a Telluride or a Palisade that Hyundai and Kia make. It's a 3-row SUV. It's expensive, $60,000 to $80,000, but you're going to pay pretty close to that for the gas version of that car. And then Chevy is coming out with the Blazer. They're reusing the nameplate of the Blazer. That's a mid-size SUV in the $50,000 range. So there's a lot of things out there, but I always like the Bolt because it's a darn good car. It's inexpensive. You can get it new for a good price. So yeah. That's the roundup. Pretty much any car company out there now, you can see all the different nameplates that are there. There's I can't think of anybody that's a normal other than Toyota. Toyota right now is the laggard, right? Everybody likes Toyotas. They're very popular, but they only have one EV, and Subaru, they only have one EV. And right now, I wouldn't quite get it. It's not up to the standard of some of these other ones yet. But other than Toyota, Hyundai, in my opinion, Hyundai and Kia are really kicking ass right now. They have a great selection. Their styling is great. Their tech is great. You gotta take a look at them. And they're not. Unfortunately, they're not like cheap. They're about the same price as everybody else for an EV. And oh boy, I wish I could remember the name of that one. The Hyundai, it's not the Kona. There's a Kia Niro, the Kia e-Niro as well. That's going to be a little less expensive. I don't have a picture of it here.
I have
But
a
if
friend
you-
who has one of those. She really loves it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's quite
if
small,
you're-
but it's nice.
I would look if you're looking inexpensive. You know what are the inexpensive EVs out now? I would say the Chevy Bolt, or look at Hyundai and Kia, and just look at their websites. And you can go on there, you can see what they offer, and what the size of the vehicle is, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
James, did you have anything else you wanted to follow up
That
with?
was sort of what I was going to ask, and I noticed I was looking for something like, well, maybe a little more than a Bolt, but it kind of jumps from the 20,000 before the incentives right up to 40,000. There isn't sort of like a high 20, just seems to be a big jump, and
Yeah.
it wasn't like an in between thing to take a
Yeah.
look at.
Now, there's two flavors of the Bolt, by the way, right? There's the
Yeah.
Bolt EV and the EUV. I don't know why they did that, but the EUV is slightly bigger, but I don't think it's that much bigger. But
Right.
that one may be the right size for you. It's a small to mid-size SUV hatchback, I would call it. So that's a good size. And yeah, from there you jump up to the Kia e-Niro or that Hyundai that I can't remember the name of. They're both the size of the Bolt, or probably even smaller, perhaps.
Really?
And then you want to jump up to like the Ioniq 5. I don't have a picture of the Ioniq 5. Very distinctive, very cool looking, angular hatchback, mid-size SUV-ish kind of a thing. One of my friends has one, and he loves it, but again, they're $45,000 is about where they're starting. So yeah, you're right. There's very little that's in that $30,000 range right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And
That's
there
very
there will be a number of innovations. I mean, I know Toyota, as you said, is way behind, but they have a solid state battery that they've are exploring that's expected that they even estimate will give 750-mile range, and
Ooh, that'd be nice.
that's what they've said. and less and
I have lots of grains of salt.
I'm just reporting what they've released.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But here's kind of an oddball question. Is there any difference between, a gas car and an electric vehicle in terms of how it handles in the snow, maybe based on weight distribution?
I would say the EVs generally are heavier, right? And so they are heavier. Some people say, I talked about the maintenance thing. I'll just sidetrack into maintenance for just 30 seconds. That you go through tires faster with an EV. Now, I think that can be true. It depends how you drive. I mean, I drive like a 60-some-year-old man, so I don't really, I'm not drag racing too many kids at the lights with my Tesla. I could, it would be fun, and I'm tempted to very often, but I don't do that. And so I think the people that I read about that are going through a set of tires in 15,000 miles, that's what they're doing. They're driving it like they stole it, right? If you don't, I've got 25,000 miles on the car, and I probably do need a pair of tires next year. I've been saying that for a couple of years, and I keep eking another year out of it. So anyway, I was tired. But how they drive, generally the EVs handle really well because of that skateboard design, right? So I'm going to say sorry, I don't mean to disparage the Chevy Bolt. The Chevy Bolt was never intended to be a sporty or performance kind of car, right? It's a small economy car, but that car will outhandle and out accelerate a lot of other cars in its class that are, just because of the nature of it being an EV. It has, the motors have a lot of torque. They accelerate generally pretty darn well. And the weight being all down low makes it handle well. Now in the snow, I think you've got anecdotal evidence. You know, if you've got an all-wheel drive EV and you've got the right tires, it being heavier, maybe it's going to, you know, handle a little better in the snow. But I think they're going to be the same. I mean, I haven't really, you know, this is just people who've owned lots of cars over their lives saying, yeah, the car does fine in the snow, but lots of cars do fine in the snow. So I don't know. I don't think there's any advantage there, you know. I don't know. Tom, does anybody else have any other experience with that? Yeah.
No, but I think you're generally right, and I both I have heard again with the tires, and even that's even from some of the tire manufacturers who've shared that information too. That they do expect it to be more frequent, but overall, like you say, your cost of ownership is going to be much lower with an electric vehicle than it will be with an internal combustion.
Yeah. And Consumer Reports did a study. I've got a one pager from it or something, but you know, something like, you know, $6,000 to $10,000 over the life of the car is what they expect you to save. Now, life of the car can be 15 years, right? So I think they were being very conservative. There's a calculator that the feds have. It's probably, you know, Tom sent out the fueleconomy.gov one. It might be there. I've got some, you know, some links too for that, but you can, you know, just Google around for cost of, you know, total cost of ownership of an EV, and you'll find all kinds of information, you know, out there around. But, you know, the gas is definitely one. I was just going to put up a chart I had. I don't have it with the gas. Oh, there I do. Let me just share. Let me just share this just for a second, then I'll get right to you, Simon. So this is a spreadsheet that I made, and you know, this is just math. So this stuff is pretty easy to look at. You can say, okay, what's the price of gas? What's the price of electricity? What's the fuel efficiency on my car? And this is, you know, actually a little high for my Tesla, but this is about what it is. And then you can put in whatever gas fuel efficiency you get and say, okay, for 300 miles, here's what it costs to put electricity in the car versus what it costs to put gas in the car. So, you know, this is the kind of thing that's pretty easy to do because you can, you know, it's pretty much math, you know. So once you get used to the fact that EVs aren't measured by miles per gallon anymore, they're measured by how many watt hours they use in a mile. You know, this equates to about 4 miles per kilowatt hour. So if we just if this was 250 and we invert the numbers, instead of how many watts per mile, how many miles you get per kilowatt, it comes out to about 4. So you get something that's similar to miles per gallon. But so when you add that up, you know, it can be quite substantial. I mean, I've worked with the town government here in Hyde Park with the police department, and they want to replace some of their police cruisers with EVs, and I'm able to show them that, you know, oh, police cruisers are terrible because they just sit and they idle all day long. They get like 6 or 7 miles per gallon. You know, even a newer car, you know, so they would save $4,000 to $5,000 a year on fuel and maintenance on each car, and so it's quite substantial. Yeah. Let me get back to Simon. Go ahead.
Question about purchasing a used EV. I think you said, Steve, you'd bought one. Did you buy it from Tesla or did you buy it from a private seller?
I haven't bought a used one. I bought mine new. There are, I mean, all the standard places you can buy used cars. You can get used EVs.
What kind of service can you have on a used EV if you don't buy it from, say, Tesla? Let's say it's a Tesla. You buy a used Tesla 3 from a private seller. Will Tesla still service it once you bought it from that private seller?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's like any other car. It has, you know, it has warranty just like any other car. If you buy a used car and it's still in warranty, that's always nice, right? I guess like I said, the powertrain warranties are usually quite long on these cars. Yeah, so certainly Tesla will service it, Chevy will service the used bolts, just like any other car. The only advice I would give you looking at a used car is, we talked really briefly, and I know we're going over our time, so if anybody needs to bug out, we understand, but I talked really briefly about the battery warranties, right? And the battery is warranted to not degrade past a certain amount in that period of time. Well, batteries do degrade, all right? The battery, your 5-year-old car doesn't get the same range that your brand new car gets. And so that's one of the things to look at for a used car. So like my car now, after 4.5 years, I've lost, I think I just calculated it the other day, I think it's 6% of the battery. So I used to get 320 miles, 325, I think, when it's brand new, and now it's like 301 or something like that if I fill it up, right? So when you're buying a used EV, that can vary car to car and even individual car to individual car. If someone has, it depends how kind of they've taken care of it. There are certain good practices for charging the car that will help your battery not degrade. And so, yeah, it's like anybody else. People, some people take good care of their cars, and maybe other people don't take good care of their cars. So one of the things I always tell folks to do, if you're looking at a used car, have someone say, okay, charge it up to 100%, which is not normal. You don't normally charge your car to 100%. You usually charge it to 90 or 85 or something like that, as a way of being less stressful for the battery, right, and helping the battery longevity. But if you were buying a used EV, I would ask the owner, hey, charge that up to 100% and show me what the rated range is on the car. And you can compare that to the original, rated range from the EPA for that car, and it shouldn't have degraded very much. If you're talking a 3 or 4 year old car, it should be in the 5 or 6% range, that the battery has lost 5 or 6% of its capacity. Maybe if you find, oh, geez, this battery has lost 10 or 20% of its capacity and it's only 2 or 3 years old, and maybe that person hasn't been taking care of the car as well, or maybe it was that model. I don't know, but that's one thing that you probably don't have to worry about buying a gas car, right? You have all these other things to worry about, but the EV, you do have to look at the health of the battery, right?
Okay, Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to add a comment. I think that was excellent advice on the battery life. I do believe that Tesla, with their leases, does not allow the owner to hold on to the vehicle at the end of the lease and do the acquisition.
Yeah.
So there are likely to be quite a number of opportunities to purchase a used Tesla post lease.
I just looked on the Tesla website. The only used car within 200 miles of here is one Tesla S.
Well, but there you go. It's not going back to the owner in most cases, at least not under the lease agreement.
Yeah,
there's lots of Teslas available, but only one, and that's an S from Tesla itself.
Interesting.
That's funny. Yeah. Tesla has done weird things with the leases. Of course, they have a plan. They have a plan to create this robo-taxi fleet once they get their full self-driving software running. And so that's what I always heard was the reason that they most of the time don't allow a lease owner to buy the car at the end of the lease, because they want the car back, because they want to do the robo-taxis. But also, I think the used car prices, except for the last year, were really up, and they just wanted to make some more money, right? So they would take the car back. Marilyn, you brought that up, and if everybody can bear with me for another minute. I mentioned autopilot or self-driving, right? And you brought that up. So almost every car, EV, non-EV today, you buy has two things that will help the car drive on the highway, right? You have adaptive cruise control. sometimes called radar cruise control, right? It's a cruise control. It's like our old friend cruise control, except it's smart. It sees the car in front of it and will slow down, right? And at almost every price level, you will find that feature now. It's pretty much standard. And at most price levels, you will find an auto steering feature. So, you know, my wife's Hyundai SUV has it. You know, we've had it on a couple other cars, where you can tell the car to stay in its lane, stay centered in its lane. And so with that feature and the adaptive cruise control, you've essentially got something that will drive the car for you on the highway, right? Now, I have limited experience because I've only had 3 cars that have had this on it myself, and they've done it with varying degrees of success. I had a Volvo SUV, and it would drive, you know, the radar cruise control works flawlessly in every vehicle I've ever seen. That part is easy. They've pretty much got that all knocked, every car. It's the steering in the lane that gets a little tricky. So we took the Volvo down to South Carolina, and every so often, I mean, once every hour or two, it would just decide to stop steering. It would just disengage, and there would be no chime, there would be no lights, there would be nothing. You know, I have my hands on the wheel. I'm not playing chess with somebody in the back seat. You know, I have my hands on the wheel, and I've noticed, oh, the car's drifting off to the side. Why are we? Oh, it turned itself off. Why didn't you let me know? So I wasn't very happy with that, but it did a pretty good job of steering. Now we've got this Hyundai, a Hyundai Santa Fe hybrid that my wife has, and it doesn't do dumb things like that, but it doesn't do a particularly great job of steering. I mean, it's all right if you're on a straight road, it'll go on a straight road, but you know, if you give it anything much more challenging, it's not going to do it. I will say I really like the autopilot on Tesla. I use it here. I'm on Route 9 and 9G. I use it on 9 and 9G. I don't use it just on highways. I would never use those other car systems. Now, that was a couple of years ago. So you have to try it. You know, if it comes on your car, you know, see what they say about using it. But I really use the autopilot. Like I said, we're going to drive to South Carolina. I'm going to have autopilot on the entire way down there. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses. Every now and then, the Tesla autopilot. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
I know that Tom has to drop off soon, and I wanted to see if he had anything else he'd like to say, or if anyone has any more questions for Tom.
No, I'm fine. So, but thanks. I think it's been a great opportunity to exchange information here, and hopefully,
Right.
Yeah,
I do need to drop off as well. So thank you both very much. It was really helpful.
absolutely. Thank you.
Hope we could help with some questions. All right.
That's great.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. You've
Welcome.
been very
Yeah.
helpful.
All right. I can continue for another minute with you, Marilyn, to answer that question if you want, you know.
Sure. Sure.
So all I was going to say with the autopilot was that it does do this thing called phantom braking. And this is what you mentioned, right? So that means there's no reason for it to put on the brakes, but it does put on the brakes. Now, it's not like you're going 60 miles an hour and it slams on the brakes and you start. It doesn't do it. It applies the brakes. It thinks there's something there, slows down a little bit, and then releases and goes back to normal. And I will have that happen every couple hours, maybe driving. You kind of get used to it, and you weigh that against, okay, how annoying is that versus what benefits do you get out of the driving system? And generally for me, I find it's much more relaxing using that system because you don't have to focus so intently on, I have to stay right in my lane and I have to watch that I'm not creeping up on the car in front of me. The car will just take those little things. You can actually look around at the other cars. You can, be more of a pilot, in an airliner. They're not, I have to maintain 43,000 feet. They're not doing that. The car does that for them. They don't have to do it. So So yes, I think the Tesla system is very good, and that comes with all Teslas right now, that autopilot. The phantom braking thing is an issue. It does happen. You know, you'd have to try it and see, you know, if it's going to annoy you. It doesn't annoy me enough not to use the system. I don't consider it a safety thing. Because yeah, if it slammed the car to a stop every now and then, that would be bad. But I don't know any systems that do that for any cars. And the same systems are on the EVs and the gas cars. So they all have the same system. It's all the same software. It doesn't matter whether it's electric or gas, you know, to you know, in the car. So
They're all going to do that.
yeah, they're all going to do this driving to various degrees of success, you know, so yeah.
So what happens? And then I promise you, we'll get off.
No, that's okay.
If you're driving on the highway, because this happens all the time, you know, and I leave several car lengths between me and the car in front of me, and people immediately come in because they see an opening.
Right.
So if you're on this automatic stuff, does your car just keep backing up?
Yeah, essentially it'll
be twice as long to get to it.
Yeah. I mean, so somebody cuts in between you and the car, you know, you're following the car, you know, you can set the amount of space you want to maintain, right? So you can say, I want to be 3 car lengths behind or 7 car lengths behind, you know, and whatever you're comfortable with at that speed, and the car will maintain that. And so, yeah, if somebody cuts in the middle, the car says, okay, well, I still have to maintain my distance. And so it slowly slows down, and then it maintains that gap. And if somebody, it would just keep doing that, you know, but it's very nice, you know, and I don't know, I like it. See, now my wife won't use any of those systems. She doesn't like any of the automatic systems at all. She just drives with her foot on the gas all the time, and that's what she does. But that's I find it helpful, and I don't you know, when I get to my end, you know, like when we drive to South Carolina, we're going to drive for 6 or 7 hours a day. I'm not dead tired at the end of driving 6 or 7 hours. I find I'm more relaxed, and it's not as tiring. So I like it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Good.
Okay.
Well, I hope I know, you know, Barbara, I could never just talk for an hour. I'm way too talking. But I hope that was helpful for everybody on here. And yeah, we can send everybody the EV coaching, the link to my coaching page if anybody wants to follow up, actually, or you can just send me an email. We can have a phone call.
Okay, awesome.
Right. So I'm going to
Okay.
get off.
Thanks,
Okay.
Will. I learned a lot.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Okay.
Appreciate you doing this.